Sue, when I was sitting across from you at the fall fundraiser and you told the story about this book that you published, I said we have to bring that story here to Sunday at CMU. So this is your first book, is that right?
It is. It is my first book that I've edited or completed. It's called West of Eden, Essays on Canadian Prairie Literature. And not only is it from me, a professor at CMU, but it's also published by CMU Press. And it's the first of its kind from CMU Press. It is a book about literature. So this is a little foray out into the wider world for CMU Press.
So where did the idea of pursuing prairie literature come from? Is this something you've been interested in for a long time? Obviously, literature of many kinds is your playground, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. When I grew up on the prairies, I grew up on a little farm in Saskatchewan, and through my youth, I actually didn't want to read Canadian literature. I thought that the prairies were a rather dry and dusty and not very exotic place. So I read British literature, and that's really my specialty. But I have always, of course, I'm a prairie person, and I've always read about and reviewed prairie literature. And when I was teaching Canadian literature a couple of years ago, I realized that there really still isn't very much analysis and criticism of Canadian literature out there, especially the prairies.
There's a lot of criticism about the prairies, perhaps colloquially, but
that's
not...
Right. But what is it that makes prairie literature? I mean, is it different than what people write in BC or in the Maritimes? What language do we use and what kind of stories do we tell? And there's been some work on that, but I thought not enough. So I put out a call for essays from scholars across Canada, and the essays flooded in, and they were very good and varied, all sorts of things.
I heard you make a comment at one point to say, is this a spiritual book or not, or where does faith show up? And it's a book about English literature. But then the title, West of Eden, kind of creates that intrigue or curiosity. So where does Eden fit into this book?
There was a sense, I think, when this place was settled by European settlers in the 19th century that some of them were lured here with the promise of an Eden, that this was a very lush place and it was practically a paradise. And many of them got here, of course, and were a little disappointed. It was a little drier than they had expected.
A little windier, a little dustier.
A few more mosquitoes. But to a certain extent, some of them did find something, not paradise, obviously, but something very beautiful and very lovely here. So this notion that this is not paradise, but that somehow we're close to paradise here, that we have a little foretaste of paradise, and that we have been given this gift of the prairies, and that we are the stewards of this gift. That was behind my thinking. It wasn't necessarily behind the thinking of the other writers in the book, but when I wrote the introduction, which situated myself as a Christian scholar against prairie literature, I thought a lot about our relationship to the land and our responsibility for the land, and this thing that God has given us, which is not perfect, and neither are we perfect, but it is nevertheless quite an extraordinary place.
Did your work with this project give you the opportunity to revisit some of those childhood feelings and emotions about what kind of a place did I end up in? Is this experience now kind of reinformed that in some way? Absolutely.
I have to accept that I'm a prairie person. I've almost always lived on the prairies, and although I wish I'd been, born in France or in England or in a castle, this is who I am and where I live. And this is a place like no other place, particularly because of the people. The people here are absolutely solid and real. And the literature that has come out of this place, in particular the poetry, I think, is a very real poetry. It has no folderol about it. Usually it's very accessible. And I think I've been reading a lot of prairie poetry lately, and the voice of the people comes through the poetry of Winnipeg poets like Catherine Hunter, for example, and Patrick Friesen, and people of that sort who have absolutely got the voice of the prairies in their work.
Thanks, Sue, for telling some of your story and for the much larger work of bringing this together to give voice to a people, a very real people that perhaps we haven't heard in this way before. It's marvelous.
Well, thank you, David. It was a pleasure to be here.